Daddy, alone, Sophie, wicked. Kiko, the pet parrot's sharp cry pierced the opulent silence of the mansion, freezing Arthur's blood. A chilling shiver ran down his spine as the bird's shrill voice echoed a secret his mind refused to accept. His eyes swept over the portrait of his father, Elias, then landed on the serene figure of his wife, Sophia, who had just smiled. But that smile suddenly seemed like a mask. What did Kiko know, and what Arthur was about to discover would shake the foundations of his perfect life? Arthur felt a tight knot in his stomach, the echo of Kiko's words reverberating in his mind. Daddy, alone, Sophie, wicked. It was just a parrot, he tried to convince himself, an animal that repeated sounds without real understanding. But the sequence, the intonation, the way Kiko seemed to fix his eyes on him as he uttered those phrases. There was something disturbingly intentional about it. Sophia, oblivious to the storm brewing in her husband's heart, tilted her head, a gesture of sweetness that once melted him but now seemed rehearsed. What is it, my love? Kiko is agitated today, she said, her voice soft as silk, but Arthur noticed a slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted a flower in the vase. He watched her, trying to find any trace of guilt or anxiety, but Sophia was a masterpiece of serenity. The woman he loved, his companion for so many years, the architect of his apparent happiness. How could she? No, it was unthinkable. He forced a smile, which felt more like a grimace. Nothing, dear. Just Kiko and his eccentricities. Sometimes he seems to have a mind of his own. Arthur tried to sound casual, but his voice was hoarser than usual. He approached Sophia, kissing her forehead, an automatic gesture that, for the first time, didn't convey its usual warmth. His eyes, however, didn't stray from her, searching for answers in the depths of her gaze, but finding only familiar calm. Later, as Sophia prepared for a charity event, Arthur found himself alone in the living room, the mansion's quiet amplifying the turmoil in his soul. Kiko, perched on his golden stand, watched him with unusual intensity. Daddy, alone, Sophie, wicked, the parrot repeated, this time with an urgency that made Arthur jump. It wasn't a random repetition. It seemed like a warning, a plea. The image of his father, Elias, came to his mind. The Golden Dawn retirement home was a renowned place with lush gardens and a praised staff. Sophia had insisted on the choice, arguing that Elias deserved the best, an environment where he could enjoy his golden years with every comfort and attention. Arthur, immersed in his business and blindly trusting Sophia's judgment, had agreed. Visits were regular, though always accompanied by Sophia, who took care of all the details. Elias seemed well, perhaps a little quieter, but Arthur attributed it to age. But now, doubt was a slow poison, corroding his certainties. Alone, Kiko whispered again, and Arthur felt a chill. Elias never liked solitude. He was a man of easy laughter who loved company. The idea of his father, isolated, neglected, was a stab to his heart. Guilt began to settle in, heavy and cold. Had he been so blind, so absorbed in his own life, that he hadn't noticed the signs? He picked up the phone, the urge to call the clinic and speak with Elias almost irresistible. But what would he say? My parrot told me you're alone, and my wife is wicked. It seemed ridiculous, a fantasy. Sophia was the personification of elegance and kindness. She organized charity dinners, supported various social causes, and was adored by everyone. The image Kiko painted was of a villain, something that didn't fit the woman he knew. Arthur walked to the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The beauty outside contrasted cruelly with the darkness beginning to form within him. He needed clarity. He needed to understand what Kiko really meant. But how? How to uncover the truth without destroying the trust he had in his wife, without casting a shadow over the life they had built together. The question hung in the air, as heavy as the silence that followed Kiko's last "wicked." He felt he was on the edge of a precipice, and the ground beneath his feet was beginning to give way. Arthur closed his eyes, trying to push away the image of the abyss opening before him. Kiko's words, once mere chirps, now hammered in his mind. Daddy, alone, Sophie, wicked. It was no longer possible to ignore them. That bird, his companion, seemed to be the only one to see the crack in his life. He turned from the window, twilight transforming the room into a sanctuary of shadows, each one hiding a secret. He needed urgent answers, but how to get them without alerting Sophia? Confronting her with the parrot's accusations was absurd, and he feared the hurt in her eyes, the destruction of everything. Yet the image of Elias, his father, the rock in his life, alone and perhaps suffering, was unbearable. Arthur felt such strong guilt that it made him stagger. How could he, a shrewd man, have been so blind in his own home? His gaze fell on Kiko, who watched him with almost human intelligence. The parrot tilted its head, as if understanding. "Daddy, sad," Kiko murmured in a lament. That new word added a layer of pain to Arthur's anguish. It wasn't just loneliness, it was a deep sadness his father might be feeling. Arthur knew he could no longer trust Sophia's information. He needed to see Elias with his own eyes, without his wife's controlling presence. A surprise visit, yes, that was the only way. He made up his mind, feeling anxious, but also a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in days, he wasn't reacting. He was planning. The next morning, Arthur acted with a discretion he didn't know he possessed. While Sophia was busy with appointments, he called the Golden Dawn Clinic, asking to speak with the head nurse, Donna Lucia, whose voice was calm and welcoming. "I'd like to make an unexpected visit to my father this afternoon," he said, trying to sound casual but with a racing heart. Just for a pleasant surprise, Donna Lucia, unsuspecting, confirmed that Elias would be available. He bid Sophia farewell with a kiss on her forehead, observing her. She smiled, her eyes shining with their usual sweetness, nothing in her demeanor betraying concern. This perfection, which once charmed him, now frightened him. He felt a chill. Was it possible to hide so much darkness behind such a luminous facade? In the car, on the way to the clinic, Arthur replayed Kiko's words. Sophie, wicked. The accusation seemed implausible, far from the woman he loved. But the parrot's insistence, the new word sad, the guilt that gnawed at him, everything propelled him forward. He gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tense. He needed to be prepared for what he would find. The silence in the vehicle was heavy, filled only by the echo of his own doubts. The road seemed longer, each kilometer an eternity, as hope and fear waged a silent battle. He was about to open a door that could reveal a devastating truth, and there was no turning back. His father's fate, and perhaps his own, depended on that moment. Arthur stopped the car at the entrance of Golden Dawn, his heart pounding in his chest. The building's facade was imposing, with its well-maintained gardens and bubbling fountain, exactly as Sophia had described. From the outside, the clinic exuded peace and prosperity. But Arthur wasn't there to admire the scenery. His eyes, now sharpened by distrust, searched for cracks in the perfection. He got out of the car, his hands sweating, and walked towards the reception. The receptionist, a young woman with a rehearsed smile, greeted him. "Good afternoon, Mr. Arthur. Donna Lucia has already been informed of your surprise visit to Mr. Elias." The mention of surprise sent a chill down Arthur's spine. He wondered if Sophia had called the clinic, as she often did, to prepare the ground. But no, he had been careful. The receptionist guided him through wide, well-lit corridors where the smell of disinfectant mingled with a faint floral scent. Everything seemed impeccable. Arthur observed the faces of the other elderly residents, some smiling, others more introspective. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Hope, a thin thread, tried to re-emerge in his chest. But Kiko's voice still echoed. Donna Lucia, a woman with grey hair and kind eyes, waited for him at Elias's room door. Her smile was warm, but Arthur noticed a shadow of tiredness in her gaze. "Mr. Arthur, it's good to see you. Your father will be very happy." She led him inside. The room was spacious, with a large window overlooking a small patio. There was a comfortable armchair and a bookshelf with some books. At first glance, it seemed like a welcoming environment. But then, his eyes found Elias. His father was sitting in the armchair, his back to the door, looking out at the patio. He seemed smaller, more fragile than Arthur remembered. His hair, once thick and grey, was thin and disheveled. His clothes, though clean, seemed a little too big for his emaciated body. Elias didn't turn immediately, absorbed in his thoughts. "Daddy!" Arthur called, his voice choked. Elias flinched, turning slowly. His eyes, once full of life and sparkle, were dull, almost empty. A weak, hesitant smile appeared on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Arthur, my son, what a surprise." Elias's voice was a whisper, hoarse and weak, very different from the vibrant tone Arthur had always known. He tried to stand, but his legs seemed to fail him. Arthur rushed to him, kneeling beside the armchair, holding his father's cold, wrinkled hands. "Father, how are you? Why didn't you tell me you were like this?" Guilt crushed him. Elias's hands trembled slightly. "I'm fine, son. Just a little tired." But his eyes told another story. There was a deep sadness, a loneliness that Arthur immediately recognized from Kiko's words. Alone. Sad. Donna Lucia watched the scene with an expression of sorrow. "Mr. Elias has been a little more reclusive lately, Mr. Arthur. We've tried to cheer him up, but he misses company." The nurse's words, spoken with the best of intentions, sounded like a painful confirmation. Arthur looked around the room. There were no family photos, no personal objects he remembered. It was an impersonal, almost sterile room, despite the attempt to make it welcoming. His father, the man who had always been the pillar of his life, was there, wasting away in silence. Rage began to boil within Arthur, mixed with a searing pain. Sophia, Kiko's words, "Sophie, wicked!" exploded in his mind with terrifying clarity. He had trusted her blindly, entrusting his father's well-being into her hands, and she had betrayed that trust in the cruelest way. His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back, holding them in. He needed to be strong for Elias. He needed to understand everything, every detail of that farce. That room, that loneliness, was just the tip of the iceberg. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also an iron determination. The truth would be revealed, and Sophia, without a doubt, would face the consequences of her actions. Arthur squeezed Elias's hands, feeling the fragility of the bones. His eyes, previously tear-filled, burned with pain and contained anger. He leaned in, his voice low and tender. "Father, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Tell me what happened." Elias looked away, a tremor running through him. "Nothing, son. Just old age." The denial was weak. Arthur perceived the fear. This was not the strong Elias, but a frightened shadow. Donna Lucia, with a sigh, touched Arthur's shoulder. "Mr. Arthur, perhaps it's better if we talk outside. Your father needs to rest." Arthur nodded, reluctantly. Before leaving, he kissed Elias's wrinkled forehead. "I'll be back, father. We'll sort this out, I promise." Elias merely waved weakly, his eyes fixed on emptiness. In the corridor, Arthur confronted Donna Lucia, his voice urgent. "Be honest. What's happening to my father? Why is he so different? And why is the room without photos?" The nurse hesitated. "Mr. Arthur. Mrs." Sophia gave clear instructions. She said he needed a calm environment without distractions, limited visits, and she always asked for him to be prepared for your arrivals. Prepared? The word echoed, revealing the manipulation. Sophia didn't want him to see the reality and his condition. He seems neglected. Donna Lucia lowered her gaze. We did what we could with the instructions. Mrs. Sophia controlled expenses and decisions. She insisted he didn't need therapies or group activities. She said he preferred solitude. The nurse's voice was full of genuine sorrow. Arthur's fury grew. He maintained his composure. Donna Lucia, from now on, I am solely responsible for decisions regarding my father. Provide everything he needs, therapy, companionship, food, and keep this conversation a secret. I don't want Sophia to know I was here or that I'm investigating. Donna Lucia, relieved, nodded. Of course, Mr. Arthur, we will do everything in our power. As he left the clinic, the sun was setting, painting the sky red. The beauty outside seemed a mockery of Arthur's darkness. The image of his father wasting away and Donna Lucia's words confirming Sophia's cruelty were an unbearable weight. The pain of betrayal was deep, but the guilt for having been so blind was even greater. He had failed his father. In the car, Arthur started the engine, but remained still. He needed to think, to plan. Sophia was cunning. She wouldn't give up easily. He needed irrefutable proof, a way to expose the truth without further harming Elias. Confronting her was tempting, but he needed to be strategic. Justice for Elias would come, and it would be complete. He drove home, his mind buzzing. Every detail of his life with Sophia, every gesture, every sweet word, now seemed like an elaborate lie. The woman he loved was a stranger, a predator. Kiko, the parrot, his guardian angel, the only one to see the truth. Arthur felt a knot in his throat, gratitude and despair. He needed to protect Elias, to unmask Sophia. The battle would be difficult, but he was ready. He would no longer be the naive magnate. He would be the son, determined to rescue his father and restore justice. The path would be arduous, but the promise to Elias echoed, giving him strength. Arthur parked the car in the mansion's garage, but didn't get out immediately. The engine, now silent, seemed to amplify the turmoil in his mind. The promise made to Elias echoed, a melody of pain and determination. He felt like a stranger in his own life, a detective in disguise in the house that was once his sanctuary. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in his hands, and forced on a mask of normalcy before entering. Sophia awaited him in the living room, flipping through a decor magazine with carefree elegance. "Darling, glad you're home. Dinner's almost ready," she said, raising her eyes and offering him a smile that, to Arthur, now seemed made of glass. He approached, kissed her forehead, an act that required immense effort not to reveal the revulsion he felt. His eyes, once full of admiration, now scanned her for any hint of the cruelty Kiko and Donna Lucia had revealed, but Sophia was impeccable, serene, a perfect actress on her stage of lies. "I'm a bit tired, dear. Had a busy day," Arthur murmured, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. He sat in a distant armchair, watching her. Kiko, perched on his stand, seemed to observe him too, with an intelligence that unnerved him. The parrot tilted its head, and Arthur waited, tense, for any word. But Kiko remained silent, as if knowing the game had changed, that the truth was now in human hands. During dinner, Arthur barely touched his food. Sophia chattered about preparations for the next charity event, about new jewelry she had seen, and about a trip she was planning to Europe. Every word from her, once heard with affection, now sounded hollow, distant, an irritating noise that covered his father's pain. He nodded, forced smiles, his mind feverishly working on how to unravel the web of deceit. The idea that Sophia could be plotting something so vile while he lived in his bubble of opulence was a devastating blow to his pride and his heart. That night, Arthur pretended to sleep, but his eyes were open in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. The image of Elias, fragile and alone, mingled with Kiko's voice and Donna Lucia's words. He needed proof, something concrete he could confront Sophia with without being refuted. The first step would be to investigate Elias's finances. Sophia had taken charge of all arrangements, and Arthur, trusting her, had never questioned it. He knew his father's assets were considerable, and the idea that Sophia might be siphoning off that fortune while Elias wasted away was a revolting thought. He got up silently, walking to his office. He lit only a small lamp, its soft light illuminating the desk. He opened his personal safe, where he kept important documents. He needed to find Elias's papers, bank statements, the clinic contracts. With each folder he rummaged through, each document he analyzed, a sense of urgency consumed him. He felt he was racing against time, that every minute of his inaction was another minute of suffering for his father. Guilt was a heavy burden, but the determination to rectify it was even stronger. He wouldn't rest until the truth came to light, and Elias was rescued from that shadow. The night would be long, and the path to justice tortuous. Arthur delved into the pile of documents, the lamp's light casting dancing shadows on the desk. Each paper, once an ignored formality, was now a fragment of a dark puzzle. He found Elias's bank statements, meticulously organized by Sophia. At first glance, everything seemed in order. Regular payments to Golden Dawn, maintenance expenses for smaller properties Elias owned, and a considerable sum in an investment account. However, something didn't fit. Golden Dawn was expensive, yes, but the amounts Sophia presented to him were exorbitant, even for a high-standard facility. He compared the statements with old invoices he managed to find, a glaring discrepancy. The original clinic invoices, those he paid directly before Sophia took full control, showed more reasonable amounts, but the most recent statements under Sophia's management inflated the costs absurdly. It wasn't just a matter of small increases. It seemed the amounts had almost doubled. Rage bubbled in his chest, a hot, nauseating wave. Sophia wasn't just neglecting Elias, she was stealing, brazenly, using the facade of care to siphon off his father's fortune. Arthur felt a chill as he realized the extent of the cruelty. It wasn't just Elias's loneliness, it was financial exploitation, greed disguised as love and concern. He continued to search, his fingers trembling. It was then that, behind a folder of Elias's investments, he found a discreet, unlabeled envelope. Inside, there was a single document, a lease agreement for a small apartment in a remote neighborhood, in the name of an unknown company, and most shockingly, a power of attorney signed by Elias, granting Sophia full powers over all his assets, with a date that Arthur knew to be impossible. On that day, Elias was recovering from delicate surgery, sedated and unable to sign anything. Arthur's hands trembled so much the paper almost fell. Elias's signature looked forced, shaky, almost illegible. That was a forgery, a fraud. The revelation hit him like lightning. The apartment contract, the unknown company, the forged power of attorney. Arthur's mind connected the dots with terrifying clarity. Elias wasn't just reclusive at Golden Dawn. He was being held somewhere else, perhaps in that apartment, while Sophia used the prestigious clinic as a smokescreen for Arthur and to siphon off the money. The subhuman conditions of the premise began to make painful sense. The image of his father wasting away, Kiko's voice echoing, "Daddy, alone, Sophie, wicked." Everything fit into a mosaic of betrayal and cruelty. Arthur felt a scream trapped in his throat, a mixture of pain and fury that threatened to explode. His eyes filled with tears, but he held them back, transforming the pain into a cold, relentless determination. He could no longer doubt. Sophia was a criminal, a ruthless manipulator. He carefully put away the documents, his heart beating like a war drum. The turning point had arrived, and the truth was darker than he could imagine. It wasn't just neglect, but a veiled kidnapping, an elaborate farce to rob his father. Arthur knew he needed to act with extreme caution. Sophia was dangerous, and Elias was in her hands. He needed more proof, an infallible plan to rescue his father and expose Sophia without putting Elias at risk. Dawn was approaching, but for Arthur, the night was just beginning, promising an uncertain future. Arthur felt the weight of the early morning on his shoulders, but there was no room for tiredness. The truth, cold and brutal, had revealed itself, and the image of his father, Elias, wasting away somewhere unknown, ignited a flame of fury and love in his chest. He could not fail again. The guilt for his blindness was a burden, but now it transformed into fuel for action. He closed the safe, putting away the incriminating documents. The apartment contract, the forged power of attorney, these were the keys to unraveling Elias's captivity. Arthur knew he needed to act with intelligence and discretion. Sophia was a cunning adversary, and any misstep could put Elias in even greater danger. The first ray of sunlight peeked through the office curtains, painting the room with a pale gold. Arthur hadn't slept. Instead, he spent hours devising a plan, every detail meticulously thought out. He needed to locate that apartment. The unknown company in the contract was his starting point. He would use his contacts, his information network, but so subtly that no one, especially Sophia, would suspect. As he went down for breakfast, he found Sophia in the kitchen, preparing tea with her usual grace. She seemed oblivious to the abyss that had opened between them. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" she asked. With a smile that Arthur now saw as a well-crafted mask, he forced a smile back, a tight knot in his throat. "Yes, dear. Just some thoughts about work." The lie hurt, but it was necessary. Kiko, on his perch in the living room, watched them in silence. His bright eyes seemed to carry a deep knowledge, a silent complicity. Arthur felt a shiver of gratitude for the little bird who, with its innocence, had unveiled the darkness. After breakfast, Arthur left for the office, as on a normal day. But his destination was not the city's financial center. He drove to an older neighborhood where he had a trusted friend, a retired private detective named Miguel, a man of few words and great insight. Miguel had helped Arthur with some business investigations in the past, always with absolute discretion. Upon arrival, Arthur explained the situation in a low voice, showing the lease agreement and the power of attorney. Miguel, his face marked by experience, listened attentively, his narrowed eyes evaluating every word. "A well-crafted plot, Arthur, but the truth always finds a way," Miguel said, his voice hoarse. "I'll investigate this company and the apartment address. No one will know I'm working for you." Arthur felt a faint relief. Having Miguel by his side was like having a lighthouse in the midst of a storm. That man wouldn't ask unnecessary questions. He would simply act. "I need speed, Miguel. My father is in danger." Miguel nodded, the seriousness in his gaze confirming the urgency. "Leave it to me. I have some contacts who can speed this up." As he drove home, Arthur felt a mix of hope and apprehension. He was taking the first steps to rescue Elias, but the path was still long and full of uncertainties. With each kilometer, the image of his father, alone and vulnerable, propelled him forward. He would not allow Sophia to win. Justice would come, and Elias would be free. The connection with his father, which he thought he had lost, was now the driving force of his life. He knew that the truth, however painful, was the only path to healing and the restoration of his family. The connection with his father, which he thought he had lost, was now the driving force of his life. The mansion, once a refuge of peace, became a stage where Arthur played a role, each smile for Sophia a painful lie. He observed his wife with a new lens, noticing the coldness in her eyes when she spoke of Elias, her haste to change the subject when his father was mentioned. The luxury that surrounded them felt suffocating, a constant reminder of the fortune Sophia was siphoning off, while his father, the man who gave him everything, suffered somewhere. Each day was an eternity of waiting, with Arthur dividing his time between the office, where he feigned normalcy, and his secret world of investigation. Sophia, oblivious to the brewing storm, continued to plan social events and discuss renovations for their summer house. "Darling, you've been so distant lately," she commented one evening as Arthur tried to disguise the agitation in his gaze. "Perhaps work stress. You should take a few days off." Her concern seemed genuine, but Arthur saw through the facade, feeling a chill. He merely nodded, forcing a tired smile, while Kiko, on his perch, watched the scene with his penetrating eyes, as if understanding the farce unfolding. The parrot remained silent, but its presence was a constant reminder of the truth. Arthur could barely sleep. Nights were filled with thoughts of Elias, imagining his father in precarious conditions, alone and scared. Guilt gnawed at him, but the determination to rescue him was a fire burning in his chest. He reviewed the forged documents, the apartment contract, the power of attorney, each detailed proof of Sophia's cruelty. The image of Elias, fragile and with empty eyes at the clinic, was a torment that propelled him. He needed news from Miguel. He needed a plan. The call came the next morning as Arthur pretended to review reports in his office. Miguel's name flashed on the screen, and Arthur answered, his voice low, his heart racing. "Arthur, I have some information," Miguel said, his voice hoarse and serious. "The company on the lease agreement is a front, registered in the name of a straw man with no real commercial activities, and the apartment. I got the address. It's in an old building, in a neighborhood that doesn't match Elias's standard of living. No one has seen him there, but the doorman confirmed that the rent is paid religiously by a woman who fits Sophia's description." Miguel's words were a punch to Arthur's stomach, but also a grim confirmation. No one has seen him there. The phrase echoed, painting a picture of even deeper isolation than he had imagined. Elias wasn't just in an unsuitable place. He was hidden, likely kept in secret. Arthur's fury intensified, mixed with overwhelming despair. Sophia had not only deceived him, but had kidnapped his own father, holding him captive to steal his fortune. "Miguel, I need you to help me get into that apartment." Discreetly, without drawing attention, Arthur asked, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "I need to see my father. I need irrefutable proof." Miguel hesitated for a moment. "It's risky, Arthur. Sophia might have accomplices, or the place could be monitored." But the determination in Arthur's voice was unwavering. "I don't care about the risk, Miguel. My father is there, and I'm going to rescue him." The promise to Elias now was a vow of war. Arthur would not rest until justice was done and his father was safe. Arthur would not rest until justice was done and his father was safe. Miguel's voice, though cautious, had ignited a new flame of hope and urgency in his chest. They met again the next morning, in a discreet cafe far from Sophia's curious eyes. Arthur had barely slept, his mind constantly churning, replaying every possible scenario. Miguel, with his usual calm, presented a plan. "We can't just break down the door, Arthur. We need a discreet entry. I have a contact who can get us access, a locksmith who does work for the building. He can help us with a master key," claiming a maintenance issue. Arthur nodded, his eyes fixed on the untouched coffee cup. "And the doorman? Wouldn't he suspect anything?" "The doorman works in shifts. We'll choose the shift of the most distracted one, who usually reads the newspaper and doesn't pay much attention, and the locksmith is known there. It will be quick, Arthur. We'll go in, you'll see your father, and we'll leave with him. Afterward, we'll contact the police and the lawyers. The idea of seeing Elias again, of taking him from that captivity, made Arthur's heart clench. Guilt was still a heavy burden, but the proximity of action transformed it into an iron determination. When can we do this? Tomorrow night, it's the shift of the doorman I mentioned, and the locksmith will be available. The wait would be agonizing, but Arthur knew that every second was crucial for his father's safety. He spent the next day in a state of contained nervousness, feigning normalcy for Sophia, who seemed oblivious to the impending storm. She spoke of weekend plans, of a new dress she had bought, while Arthur nodded, his mind racing, mentally rehearsing every step of the plan. Kiko, on his perch, seemed quieter than usual, observing Arthur with an intensity that made him feel understood. When night fell, Arthur bid Sophia farewell with a superficial kiss, claiming a last-minute business meeting. In the car, the silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own breathing. He drove to the meeting point, where Miguel was already waiting for him, with the locksmith, a middle-aged man with a tired but professional look. The neighborhood was old, the streets dimly lit, and the building, with its worn facade, looked like a dark fortress. Arthur's heart pounded erratically. They entered, and the doorman, as expected, was engrossed in his newspaper. The locksmith, with impressive naturalness, explained that there was a problem with the intercom system in apartment 302, and he needed to check it. The doorman barely looked up. They climbed the stairs, each step an echo of Arthur's anxiety. On the third floor, the corridor was dark and silent. The locksmith acted quickly and skillfully, and in a few minutes the door creaked open to darkness. Arthur felt a chill. The smell of mold and abandonment hit his nostrils. Miguel turned on a small flashlight, and the beam of light revealed a small, dusty, disorganized apartment. Old clothes piled up, dirty dishes in the sink, and a heavy silence that seemed to cry for help. "Father?" Arthur called. His voice choked. In the furthest room, Miguel's flashlight beam found a figure huddled on a simple bed, covered by a frayed blanket. Elias was there, thin, pale, his eyes sunken, fixed on emptiness. His face, once vibrant, was now a mask of despair and loneliness. Arthur felt his legs weaken. The image was even more devastating than he had imagined. Sophia's cruelty was palpable in every detail of that place. He rushed to the bed, kneeling, his heart torn. "Father." "It's me, Arthur. I came to get you." The tears he had held back for so long finally streamed down, hot and abundant. Elias blinked, his eyes watery, and a slight tremor ran through his body. A weak sigh escaped his parched lips, and a single tear rolled down his wrinkled face. He extended a trembling hand, and Arthur held it tenderly, feeling his father's fragility. That moment of reunion amidst misery was a mix of excruciating pain and overwhelming relief. The promise of justice for Elias was about to be fulfilled, and Arthur knew there was no turning back. Arthur held Elias's hand with a delicacy that contrasted with the fury boiling within him. His father's skin was cold and rough, and the tremor he felt was not just from weakness, but from a deep fear. "Father, you don't need to be afraid anymore," Arthur whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm here. I'm taking you home." Elias tried to speak, but only a guttural sound escaped his parched lips. His eyes, once so full of life and wisdom, now carried an unbearable sadness, but also a flicker of recognition, a small flame of hope that made Arthur's heart clench even tighter. Miguel, with his usual discretion, approached. "We need to be quick, Arthur. The locksmith is already at the door." Arthur nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. He turned to his father. "Come on, father. Can you stand up?" With Arthur and Miguel's help, Elias rose with difficulty, his legs faltering. Each movement was a painful effort. Arthur supported him, feeling the weight of his father's thin, fragile body. The sight of Elias in that state, a result of Sophia's cruelty, fueled a cold determination in Arthur. There was no more room for doubt or hesitation. They descended the stairs slowly, the night silence amplifying each step. The doorman was still engrossed in his newspaper. They left the building unnoticed, the cold pre-dawn air a welcome contrast to the stuffy smell of the apartment. In Miguel's car, Arthur settled Elias in the back seat, covering him with a blanket Miguel had provided. Elias seemed exhausted, but his eyes didn't stray from Arthur, as if he feared he would disappear again. "Where are we going, Arthur?" Miguel asked, starting the engine. "To a safe place, Miguel. A place where he can recover in peace," Arthur replied, his voice firm. He had thought about this. He couldn't take him to the mansion, where Sophia still was, nor to Golden Dawn, which was now a symbol of the farce. He had a country house, isolated and cozy, that hadn't been visited for years. It would be the perfect refuge. During the journey, Arthur held Elias's hand, speaking softly, telling him that everything would be all right, that he was safe now. Elias didn't respond with words, but the weak squeeze of his hand and the silent tears that streamed down his wrinkled face showed that he understood. Arthur's guilt was immense, but the joy of having his father back, even if so weakened, was a balm for his soul. As they arrived at the country house, the sun began to rise, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. The place was simple but welcoming, with a blooming garden and the singing of birds. Arthur helped Elias inside, guiding him to a room with a soft, clean bed. "Rest, Father. I'll take care of everything," Arthur promised, adjusting the blankets. Elias closed his eyes, and Arthur could see a subtle relaxation in his expression. Miguel said goodbye, promising to initiate legal proceedings and contact his network to gather more evidence against Sophia. "Don't worry, Arthur. Justice will be done," he assured before leaving. Arthur was left alone with his father. The quiet of the country house, a contrast to the whirlwind of emotions within him. He sat beside the bed, watching Elias sleep. That man, his father, had been subjected to unimaginable cruelty, and Arthur, in his blindness, had allowed it. But now, he was there, and Arthur would do everything to heal the wounds, both physical and emotional. The connection between them, which seemed lost, was being rebuilt in that silence, brick by brick. The fight for justice would be arduous, but Elias's presence, his father's simple breathing, was the greatest motivation. Arthur felt that a new phase of his life was beginning, a phase of redemption and unconditional love. He would not only rescue Elias, he would rescue himself. Arthur felt that a new phase of his life was beginning, a phase of redemption and unconditional love. He would not only rescue Elias, he would rescue himself. In the quiet of the country house, Arthur watched his father sleep. Elias's breathing was faint but regular, a sound that to Arthur was the sweetest melody. Paleness still marked his wrinkled face, but the tension had lessened, replaced by a semblance of peace he hadn't seen in a long time. That man, his father, had been subjected to unimaginable cruelty, and Arthur, in his blindness, had allowed it. Guilt was a heavy burden, but seeing him there, safe, was a balm. He prepared a mild tea, made sure the room was warm and comfortable. When Elias awoke hours later, his eyes met Arthur's with renewed clarity, a faint glimmer of gratitude and relief. A weak, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his lips. "Son." Elias's voice was a hoarse whisper, but it was the most beautiful word Arthur had ever heard. He held his father's hand, feeling the connection strengthen with each passing second. "I'm here, Father, and I'm not going anywhere." That moment of tenderness renewed Arthur's determination. Elias was safe, and now it was time for Sophia to face the consequences of her actions. The mansion, once a home, was now the stage for a farce that needed to be exposed. Arthur bid Elias farewell, promising to return soon, and left, his heart heavy with separation, but firm in his purpose. Upon arriving home, the atmosphere seemed strangely normal. Sophia was in the living room, flipping through a fashion magazine, with Kiko on his perch watching her. The parrot, seeing Arthur, let out a low chirp, almost a warning. Sophia looked up, a carefree smile on her face. "Darling, glad you're home. Was the meeting productive?" Arthur stopped in the middle of the room, his voice calm but laden with a coldness Sophia had never heard. "More productive than you can imagine, Sophia." His eyes, once full of love, were now steel. Sophia felt a chill, her smile faltering. "What's wrong, Arthur? You seem different." "I discovered the truth, Sophia. All of it." Arthur took a few steps forward, his presence imposing. "I know what you did to my father." Sophia's face paled. The magazine slipped from her hands. "I don't know what you're talking about, Arthur. Elias is at Golden Dawn as always." Her voice was a thread, tinged with panic. "Don't lie to me anymore, Sophia." Arthur's voice rose, not in uncontrolled fury, but in contained pain and deep indignation. "I know about the apartment. I know about the forged power of attorney. I know about the embezzlement of my father's fortune. I rescued him, Sophia. My father is safe." The words hit Sophia like blows. She staggered, shock and terror etched on her face. "No, it's not true. You're crazy. He's old, confused." She tried to compose herself, manipulation a second nature. "Someone is using you. Arthur, they want to separate us. They want your fortune." Arthur shook his head, bitter disappointment in his gaze. "No more excuses, Sophia. I saw the apartment. I saw my father wasting away alone. And Kiko. Kiko told me everything." He pointed to the parrot which, as if understanding, let out a loud and clear, "Sophie." "Wicked." Sophia looked at Kiko, then at Arthur, her eyes full of hatred and despair. The facade of perfection crumbled, revealing the cruel and greedy woman behind it. "You can't prove anything. Elias is senile. No one will believe you." "I have the proof, Sophia. Documents, statements, the lease agreement, the forged power of attorney, and my father's testimony once he's recovered." Arthur didn't waver. "Justice will be done. You won't hurt anyone anymore." Sophia's legs gave way, and she fell onto the sofa, her hands trembling. Her world of luxury and lies collapsed around her. Arthur watched her, his heart heavy, but with unwavering clarity. The pain of betrayal was immense, but the truth had finally freed his father and himself. Arthur left Sophia in her despair, the mansion now an empty echo of broken promises. He felt no triumph, only a deep sadness for the woman he once loved and for the blindness that had overcome him. His priority now was to ensure that Sophia faced the consequences of her actions and that Elias received all necessary care for his recovery. Arthur called Miguel immediately, explaining the situation and asking him to act with the utmost urgency to initiate legal proceedings. "I don't want her to have a chance to flee or cause more harm." His voice was firm, devoid of any emotion other than the determination to do what was right. Miguel, with his usual efficiency, assured him that the lawyers would be contacted and that the evidence would be presented to the competent authorities without delay. Meanwhile, Arthur returned to the country house. With each kilometer traveled, the image of Elias, stronger and with a renewed sparkle in his eyes, filled his mind. Upon arriving, he found his father awake, sitting on the porch, observing the garden. Elias turned, a genuine and faint smile illuminating his wrinkled face, a gesture of affection that warmed Arthur's soul. "You came back, son," he said, his voice still hoarse. But with a clarity and serenity Arthur hadn't heard in years. Arthur knelt beside his father's chair, holding his hands tenderly. "I will always come back, Father, I promise." That moment, simple and profound, sealed the restoration of a bond that Sophia's malice had almost destroyed, a silent oath of love and loyalty. The days that followed were of healing and rebuilding. Elias, under Arthur's dedicated care and that of a private nurse he hired, began to regain his strength remarkably. Meals were light and nutritious, conversations long and full of shared memories, laughter, and at times tears of relief. Arthur listened attentively to his father's stories, the pains and fears Elias had endured in his captivity, and every word reinforced the unwavering need for justice. Arthur's guilt, though still present as a shadow, gradually transformed into a driving force for the future, a constant reminder of the importance of vigilance, truth, and unconditional love. At the mansion, Sophia's life irrevocably crumbled. The authorities, armed with the irrefutable evidence gathered by Miguel and Arthur, acted swiftly and precisely. Without the need for explicit details, Sophia was confronted with the devastating magnitude of her actions. She lost everything: the fortune she coveted so eagerly, the reputation she had built on a castle of lies, and, most importantly, the freedom to continue her acts of cruelty. Justice, slow but relentless, ensured that she faced the severe consequences of her greed and betrayal. Arthur felt no pleasure in her downfall, only the bitter certainty that moral order had been restored. Kiko, the little green-feathered hero, remained at the country house with Elias and Arthur, a comforting presence and a link to the past. His daddy, alone, Sophie, wicked, were now just distant echoes of a dark past, replaced by cheerful chirps and the repetition of affectionate phrases he heard from Arthur and Elias. The parrot was a constant and living reminder that the truth, however hidden, would always find a way to light, often through the most unexpected and pure messengers. Arthur and Elias spent their afternoons together in the blooming garden, under the gentle sun, sharing the quiet and beauty of nature. Their connection was stronger than ever, forged in the pain of separation and the joy of overcoming. Arthur had learned the most valuable lesson of his life: that true wealth was not in the material possessions he had accumulated, but in the unbreakable bonds of love, trust, and respect built with family. He had rescued his father, yes, but in the process he had rescued himself from a life of appearances, falsehoods, and emotional blindness. The peace he felt now was deep and true, a solid foundation for a future of honesty, compassion, and love. He knew the path ahead would still have its challenges, but with Elias by his side and truth as his unwavering guide, he was ready for anything. Life finally had found its true purpose. Life finally had found its true purpose. Months unfolded like pages of a new and promising book at the country house. Arthur and Elias built a routine permeated with affection and tranquility. The garden, once merely a backdrop, became a refuge for gentle conversations, where father and son shared not only silence but also laughter that healed old wounds. Elias, with time and Arthur's unconditional love, regained not only physical strength but also the sparkle in his eyes, a glow of wisdom and serenity that had been dimmed by cruelty. His hands, once trembling and cold, now held Arthur's firmly, a gesture of deep gratitude and an unbreakable bond, stronger than any adversity could ever be. Arthur, in turn, had transformed profoundly. The relentless pursuit of wealth and status, which once defined his existence, gave way to a sincere appreciation for life's small pleasures. The aroma of breakfast prepared for his father, the singing of birds at dawn, the simple joy of an afternoon reading together. He had rediscovered the essence of happiness, realizing that it did not reside in grand mansions or accumulated fortunes, but in the invisible richness of family bonds and the integrity of his actions. His work now held new meaning. He began to use his influence and resources to support social causes, especially those aimed at protecting vulnerable elderly individuals, transforming his pain into an altruistic and lasting purpose, a legacy of kindness. Kiko, the green-feathered parrot, was a constant and beloved presence. His old warnings, "Daddy," "Alone," "Sophie," "Wicked," had been replaced by affectionate and cheerful phrases such as, "Good morning, Daddy," and "Arthur, I love you." He flew freely around the house and garden, a feathered guardian of the newfound peace, a living testament that truth, however difficult, always paved the way for light and healing, saving his father from a cruel fate. Arthur looked at Kiko and felt immense gratitude, remembering how the unexpected voice of a small bird had unveiled a darkness that he, in his blindness, would never have perceived. Sophia, in contrast, was a distant memory, a painful chapter that had been turned and sealed forever. Justice, with its firm and impartial hand, ensured that she faced the consequences of her actions, stripping her of everything she had coveted. Her absence from Arthur and Elias's lives was not one of resentment, but of a silent liberation, the certainty that evil would not prosper. Arthur understood that forgiveness did not mean forgetting, but rather freeing oneself from the weight of the past, focusing on rebuilding and the hope of a more just and serene future. The country house, once a temporary refuge, became the permanent home of Arthur and Elias, a sanctuary of love and new beginnings. The walls bore witness to new memories, filled with laughter, hugs, and the comforting quiet of two souls reunited. Arthur and Elias, side by side, walked towards a future where honesty, compassion, and unconditional love were the pillars of each new day. Their story was a powerful reminder that, even in the greatest adversities, faith in truth and family love are the most potent forces to overcome any obstacle, guiding us to a full and truly meaningful life. The morning sunlight bathing the blooming garden seemed brighter, a symbol of the renewed hope that bloomed eternally in their hearts, promising a tomorrow of peace. The morning sunlight bathing the blooming garden seemed brighter, a symbol of the renewed hope that bloomed eternally in their hearts, promising a tomorrow of peace. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Arthur's country house solidified as a sanctuary of love and new beginnings. Elias, now with restored health and surprising vigor for his age, spent mornings walking through the garden, observing the flowers Arthur had planted with such care. His eyes, once dull with sadness, radiated a soft light, a silent testament to the healing that filial love had wrought. He and Arthur shared long conversations on the porch, recalling old stories, laughing at forgotten jokes, and at times simply enjoying the quiet, their hands joined in a gesture of affection that transcended words. Arthur, in turn, was a transformed man. The relentless pursuit of power and fortune, which once consumed him, had been replaced by a deep satisfaction in his new life. He had rediscovered the joy of small gestures, preparing breakfast for his father, reading a book aloud at dusk, or simply watching Kiko fly freely through the garden, a vibrant green speck against the blue sky. His company, now under more conscious and ethical management, prospered, but Arthur dedicated a large part of his time and resources to social projects, especially the creation of shelters and support programs for vulnerable elderly individuals. It was his way of honoring Elias and transforming the pain of the past into a legacy of compassion. Kiko, the parrot, was more than a pet. He was a family member, a living symbol of the truth that had freed them all. His old warnings, "Daddy," "Alone," "Sophie," "Wicked," were now distant memories, replaced by a repertoire of affectionate and cheerful phrases. "Good morning, Daddy," he chirped every morning, landing on Elias's shoulder, who caressed him with a smile. "Arthur, I love you," he repeated, filling the magnate's heart with an unspeakable tenderness. Kiko was proof that the voice of truth, however improbable its origin, would always find a way to light, unveiling shadows and restoring hope. Sophia, mentioned only in occasional whispers, was a figure from the past, a bitter but necessary reminder of the lesson learned. Justice, relentless in its action, had ensured that she faced the consequences of her greed and cruelty. Arthur felt no resentment, only a serene resignation. Her absence was not an emptiness, but a space filled by authenticity and true love. He had understood that forgiveness was not forgetting evil, but freeing oneself from its power. Choosing to focus on rebuilding and hope, the country house, once a temporary refuge, became the permanent home, the stage for a new story. Arthur and Elias, side by side, walked towards a future where honesty, compassion, and unconditional love were the pillars of each new day. Their story, a testament to human resilience and the redemptive power of family love, resonated as a hymn to life. Arthur, seeing his father smile, feeling the warmth of Elias's hand in his, knew he had found true wealth, the kind no fortune could buy. The peace that enveloped the house and its inhabitants was palpable, a gift earned with courage and truth. And with each dawn, the sunlight bathing the blooming garden seemed brighter, a symbol of the renewed hope that bloomed eternally in their hearts, promising a tomorrow of peace, a future of fulfillment and gratitude. The journey had been arduous, filled with disillusionments, but the reunion with truth and unconditional love rewrote their destinies. Together, they proved that the essence of life resides in the bonds that unite us.